is day 192 of the second Trump administration, and the Epstein controversy continues to take up nearly all of the oxygen in Washington. Senate Democrats are now ratcheting up the pressure and trying to use an obscure law to force the release of the Epstein files. Watch this.
Today, Senate Democrats took action. We're invoking federal law and using our authority as a check on the executive to compel transparency. It's not a stunt. It's not symbolic. It's a formal exercise of congressional power under federal law. And we expect an answer from DOJ by August the 15th.
Well, over on the House side, the Republican Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has yet to issue a subpoena for the Epstein files from the Justice Department, despite the subcommittee vote just a week ago. As for the DOJ, prosecutors provided a judge with more information about their motion to unseal grand jury transcripts related to the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell investigations. Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputy Todd Blanche cited, quote, broad public interest in the case. Mind you, even if that gets released, though, that information is minor compared to everything that could be out there. In their filing, Bondi and Blanche also added that the grand jury witnesses against both defendants were all investigators, so they weren't even victims. Remember, Blanche spent the better part of 2 days last week interviewing Maxwell, who, of course, is serving 20 years in prison for sex trafficking over a decade. Also today, the Supreme Court announced that the justices will meet at the end of September to discuss Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal. The president has not ruled out pardoning her. And tonight, the family of one of Epstein and Maxwell's victims, Virginia Giuffre, who passed away by suicide just a few months ago, issued a statement that said the following in part, quote, the government and the president should never consider giving Ghislaine Maxwell any leniency. Maxwell destroyed many young lives, and she was convicted for only a fraction of the crimes she actually committed. She must remain in prison. Anything less would go down in history as being one of the highest travesties of justice. Well, tonight, a senior administration official tells NBC no leniency is being given or discussed. With that, let's bring in our nightcap crew. Philip Bumpus here, former Washington Post columnist. Jason Johnson, a politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University. He is also an MSNBC political contributor. And David Litt joins us, former presidential speechwriter and author of the new book, It Is Only Drowning, a true story of learning to surf and the pursuit of common ground. Can we start right there? The president himself continues to talk about this. I just read part of that devastating statement from Virginia Giuffre's family urging the president not to consider any sort of leniency. Yet the president, when on Air Force One last night, was asked about him separating with Jeffrey Epstein, and he himself said, well, he was stealing employees from me, referring to Virginia Giuffre. In 2000, right, 25 years ago, a woman under the age of 18 who worked in the spa at Mar-a-Lago, one of Donald Trump's resorts. He remembers exactly that woman and that Jeffrey Epstein, quote unquote, as he said, stole her away. I can't even remember my home address from the year 2000. What does it say about the president that he's dipping back in and taking us that deep to some really dark and concerning places?
That he only cares from the standpoint that it makes him look bad. He's not necessarily concerned about the victims. He's only concerned about how he looks or what his guilt may be. I'm like you, Stephanie. I can't remember students from 3 semesters ago. And those students are still taking classes with me sometimes. So the idea that you would remember someone who was a child, and that's a big thing for me about this. I don't say underage. These are children. Anyone who has spent time with a 16-year-old, they're babies. They are children. So the idea that this president is still rambling about this and has still not said the most obvious thing, which is, hey, we'll just release the information. I know I'm not guilty. We'll release the information. Everything he says is an indicator of his own guilt and his own shame. And anyone who backs him in this kind of behavior is just as complicit as the people who are directly involved in what was happening on that island.
But GOP leaders on the Hill seem unsure of how to move forward here. I said it before. Congressman James Comer has not issued a subpoena to the DOJ, despite a bipartisan vote in favor. But the GOP base, they are demanding this information.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the Republicans tying themselves in knots to try to not do anything and hope that the Supreme Court maybe bails them out or that Trump comes up with some plan. James Comer's view at this point seems to be to say, well, it's not a subpoena unless it's from the subpoena region of France, and hope that works as an excuse, right? So I think
that's not even cute or funny, given the gravity of this situation and the crimes committed.
Well, I think that that there's two things going on that are separate, right? Which are the crimes that are tremendously grave, and then there are the releasing the files, which they're related, obviously. But I do think that part of what has gotten the MAGA base, and particularly the manosphere part of the MAGA base that is more conspiracy theory friendly and less Trump friendly, so angry at this moment, is
You're talking the Joe Rogan world.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan world, right? These are people, and Joe Rogan, it was really interesting. He said on his show, this was the first week that he criticized Trump about this. And he said, he called it a debacle, right? He didn't mince words. He didn't say, I'm just asking questions. And he put a picture of Trump and Epstein on the front, on the cover photo of the YouTube video of his segment on it. So he's not sort of going halfway on this. And it's one of the reasons.
You can tell he's mad.
Yeah.
He's insulted. He's saying, like, we fronted for you, and now he said, what do you think, we're babies?
Yeah, and Andrew Schultz of the Flagrant podcast, he came out and directly said, this feels like a personal attack, right? Because we were out there saying this is important. You said, okay, we agree it's important, and now you're calling us conspiracy theorists. And, it doesn't surprise me that this is happening, right? I think a lot of us saw this coming, but clearly they didn't see it coming, and it feels personal. So there's these two things that are happening simultaneously, these absolutely heinous crimes that are being covered up and being excused, and then also turning to your own base and calling them a bunch of idiots, which, you don't have to be a political genius to say that may not go well.
Philip, I'm coming to you, but I see you shaking your head.
I don't care. And I mean this. Not that I don't care about these crimes. Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, Theo Von, none of these guys are going to change their vote. They're going to complain about it. They're going to gripe about it. They're going to talk about it in Congress, and they're going to vote the exact same way. That's why.
But hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I'm not saying they're going to turn around and say, I'm voting for Kamala Harris. But these guys aren't dependable Trump voters. They could just as easily not show up. Right? Lots of young men, lots of young white men who are disenfranchised, disengaged, whatever, could say, it's raining next Tuesday. I ain't voting.
They could do that, but we're talking about a presidential election. We're talking about how this affects the president, because this isn't necessarily something that's automatically going to hit members of Congress in 2026. As far as Donald Trump is concerned, this is something that looks embarrassing, but these men, if given the choice between voting for him again and whoever the Democrats put up against him, I don't think they're going to change. That's why I think a lot of this is a tempest in the teapot. It's disgusting crimes. This should be a problem. But guys like Andrew Schultz are always the first ones to say, my gosh, this is terrible. But the moment that you flash trans teenagers in front of them or something else like that, they're going to go right back to voting for MAGA.
Okay, hold on. We're moving on to Philip. Philip, today we saw Republican Senator John Kennedy. He asked if this issue is taking attention away from what Republicans are getting done, like passing the bill. Watch what he said, the budget bill.
Well, the Epstein mess is already a distraction. And it's not a political issue for me. It's a moral issue. The American people want to know, and they're entitled to know, who, if anyone, he trafficked these women to. And if there were such people, such men, then why weren't they prosecuted? I think we're beyond the point where they can say, look, trust me, there's nobody else. I think now the American people want to see receipts.
It's actually notable that some Democrats have warned this distraction might help Republicans because what's in the big budget bill is far more actually damaging to people's everyday lives.
Yeah, but that's going to manifest, right? Like that damage to those lives, that'll happen anyway, right? So you don't necessarily need to focus on that right now. I think one element of what Kenny said there in the discussion that we were just having that is getting overlooked is that there is a fissure emerging at a time when everyone is looking to what happens after Trump. Right? Donald Trump rose to power by being the guy who leveraged conspiracy theories. So, we think of Trump as being the guy who stoked all this, but he's not. He rode this wave of conspiratorialism that existed on the right, starting before the Tea Party movement, starting with the Obama administration. And now it is the case that he is a lame duck president, and all these people understand that there is a base of people who are hungry for conspiracy theories. I don't think this is going to damage Donald Trump necessarily down the road, but it is the case that there is going to be an increasing effort to try and seize that attention and seize the energy from the conspiratorial base that exists on the right, and that Donald Trump is not going to be able to hold on to ever, and that he's not necessarily going to be able to name a successor either.
Is there a risk Democrats take this too far?
Well, I think that in a very hypothetical situation where Democrats say 2026, this is the
This is
Epstein
cable
election.
news. Very hypothetical situations is what we specialize.
That's fair enough. So in that situation, then yes, absolutely, there's a risk. But I actually think this is one of those cases. I'm not saying that, like this is the one big thing that's going to end Donald Trump. We all know that there is no big thing that's going to end Donald Trump. We've been looking for it for a while. It's not going to come. That said, the Epstein scandal, it gets at the core of his credibility in two ways. And this is, I think, an important point where I do think he will lose voters, and I think Republicans will lose voters in the midterms. Not tons, but some, and you only need some. Number one, this is a populist versus globalist thing, right? The idea behind releasing the Epstein files was there's a cabal of shadowy people getting away with everything, and Trump's going to fight them. Well, now Trump's on their side. So that right off the bat. And the other thing is, if I were a Democrat running for Congress and my opponent said Trump did everything he said he was going to do, you say, no, he didn't. And that you have an immediate thing to shut that down. And those are the kind of things that we can support. It's not immediately quantifiable. I don't know you're going to see it in the numbers tomorrow, but I think these things do matter, even in the non-hypothetical.
Okay, but this goes back to your point, right? If asked, did Trump do everything he said he was going to do? If the thing is he didn't release the Epstein files, is that really going to be the thing that has somebody say, you know what, forget it, I'm voting for AOC?
I don't think so, nor do I necessarily think it'll keep anybody at home. Now, again, we're talking about 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, midterms down the road. People are complex beings, and there are multiple things that are going to go on. We still occasionally go back to conversations about gas prices. We talk about how you deal with hurricanes and natural disasters. This is bad.
Which actually impacts people in their everyday life, right? People vote on what affects them, not offends them.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, there's going to be people who are mad, and professional talkers on podcasts and stuff, they're going to talk about this because everybody pays attention to it. It gives you a lot of energy. But whether that's going to affect how somebody in suburban Cleveland votes in 2026, or let alone what they may vote for in 2028, I don't see this having that impact. We could have video come out, unless video literally came out tomorrow featuring Donald Trump engaging in some horrific act. And some of these people would say it was AI. I just don't think most of them are going to necessarily change their votes about this.